I prayed for him to die. Every night, every bruise, every insult, I whispered it into my pillow, where no one but God could hear me. I thought his death was the only door to my freedom, not because I wanted revenge, but because I had no map for escape, no language for survival. And in my mind, death felt simpler than life. I was the late child, born when my brothers were already teenagers. In our house in Dayton, Ohio, silence ruled. We prayed before meals. We prayed before bed. We didn't shout. We didn't argue. If something hurt, you folded it inside your chest and walked on. Church was my playground. The pews, my only audience. Other girls had sleepovers and cousins their age. I had hymn books and the sound of my own footsteps in empty rooms. I learned early that being good meant being quiet. I learned that obedience was a kind of love. I was 17 when I met him. Daniel. He was 27, 10 years older, worldly in ways I wasn't. He'd once played semi-pro football, and he carried himself like someone used to applause. My mother smiled when she saw him. My father said, "This is the kind of man you should marry." He visited after church with his mother, who had once been my mother's neighbor. He sat in our living room and looked at me like I was already his, and I believed that look meant safety. We didn't really date. There were no movie theaters, no long drives, no surprises. Our dates were Sunday services, a slice of pizza, and me standing at the gate while he drove away. But in that strict world, it felt like romance. It felt like God had chosen him for me. 2 years later, I wore white and signed my name next to his. My parents gave us a small house behind theirs, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, nothing fancy, but it was built with their savings, their sacrifices. My father even sold his dream car to make it possible. What began as love turned quickly into resentment. Daniel didn't want to pay the symbolic rent my parents asked for, to rebuild what they had lost. He pressed the bills into my hand one morning and said, "Go pay your mother," as if I were the criminal, as if I were betraying him by honoring the people who gave us a home. That day, I cried from sunrise to sunset. It was the first time I realized how shame can be used as a chain. He didn't want me working, even though I had trained as a teacher. "Why should you work?" he said. "I'll provide. You stay home." So I stayed. I cooked. I washed. I folded. I didn't see friends. I wasn't allowed to have any. I didn't go anywhere unless he drove me. And when I gave birth to our first child, he placed the baby in his mother's arms more often than in mine. "She knows better," he said, and something in me broke. I was a mother in name, but he had stolen the bond before it could grow. The first time he hit me hard enough to leave a mark, I was stunned more by his calm afterward than the pain itself. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He handed me a rose from the gas station and told me I provoked him, that maybe if I spoke less, obeyed more, things wouldn't get out of hand. And for a while, I believed him. Because what else could I believe? The night of his brother's engagement party, I wore a blue dress I had sewn myself. We smiled for family photos. We ate cake. On the way home in the car, his smile dissolved into rage. He accused me of looking at another man, of embarrassing him. He drove with one hand on the wheel. The other was a fist. He struck my face over and over. The streetlights flickered across his knuckles like a metronome. By the time we reached our driveway, my nose was bleeding, my blouse ruined. The next morning, I walked into my classroom with cotton in my nostrils and a lie on my lips. I had a small accident, hit the dashboard. My students believed me, and I wanted so badly to believe myself. After the violence came the apologies. Always the same script. "I didn't mean it. I'll never do it again. You know how much pressure I'm under." And then came the crumbs. A milkshake, a kiss on the forehead, the tiniest gestures, and I devoured them as if they were feasts. Because when you are starved for kindness, even crumbs feel like a banquet. When the bruises became harder to hide, I went to the elders. I thought the church would protect me. They called a meeting. A circle of men, folding chairs, Bibles open like gavel hammers. I sat with my baby girl on my lap. They asked him questions. They asked me questions. And then they said, "There has been no adultery. Without adultery, there can be no divorce. God does not allow it." I remember staring at the nylon underwear someone had given my daughter as charity, scratching her skin, and I thought, God made oceans. God made thunder. How did he become so small inside their rules? One night, When his fists became too much, I called my brother Michael. He came flying down the street, pulled me into his car, drove like he was racing death itself. We went to the police. I filed a report. I sat under bright lights while a doctor traced the maps of my bruises. He looked at me and said, "He wants to make you small because you are strong. That's why he does this." For 18 days, I lived in my mother's guest room. For 18 days, I almost believed I could start over. But then came the whispers. My son, crying for his father. My own voice, telling me I was too weak, too dependent, too alone. And I went back. Not because I forgot, but because leaving is not a straight line. It's a spiral. Sometimes you open the door, peek at the light, and slam it shut again. Hope began to arrive in small doses, 25 cents at a time. At the corner of our street stood an old payphone. I would slip outside when he wasn't watching, my children playing on the sidewalk, and I'd dial my cousin. She was in grad school, studying psychology. Her words were water to my dry soul. "You need therapy," she said. "You need to study again. You need to remember that you have a mind of your own," I argued. I said, "It's too late for me. I'm too far gone." And she would reply, "No, you are not gone. You are hidden. There is a difference." At the community clinic, I sat across from a therapist with kind eyes. She listened to my story, every detail, and then she said something I will never forget. "I see a child in you, a little girl who opens the door, peeks at the light, and then slams it shut again." I began to cry. Because she was right. That little girl was me. When his fists became predictable, he found a new weapon: silence. No greetings, no farewells. He would slam pans in the kitchen, fry meat without lids so that grease spit across the counters, then eat without a word. He moved through the house like I was invisible, and invisibility is its own kind of wound. Bruises fade, cuts heal. But contempt? Contempt hollows you out until you start to wonder if you even exist. I was no longer a wife, not even a servant. I was furniture with a pulse. New Year's Day. The children were bathed, the house quiet. He was drunk, his anger slurring every word. Usually he waited until they were asleep before striking me. Not that night. He reached for a sandal the way someone might reach for a stick to strike a dog, and something in me snapped. I reached for the heaviest thing in sight, a pressure cooker. I swung it at him, not out of courage, but out of finality. I was done being his punching bag. The children screamed. The neighbors heard. Someone opened a gate. I ran into the street barefoot, climbed a fence with my heart pounding in my throat, and once again, it was my brother Michael who found me. "You're not going back," he said, pulling me into his car. This time his voice was sharper. He didn't ask. He declared. In church once, a preacher said, "What is hidden will be exposed, and if you do not change, the grave is next." For years I clung to that prophecy. I thought, yes, God will handle it. God will kill him for me. So I waited. I sewed hymns for neighbors. I whispered into payphones. I raised my daughter, and I waited for God to send lightning. But lightning never came. Instead, God sent quieter gifts: a notebook for my plans, a therapist for my heart, a cousin for my hope, a brother for my safety. God wasn't the cage. God was the oxygen. And slowly, I realized he wasn't going to kill my husband for me. He was teaching me how to live without him. Eventually, I found courage in paperwork, a teacher's job, steady pay, health insurance, felt like armor strapped across my chest. I filed for legal separation, but separation didn't make him vanish. He moved out one spoon at a time, a shirt today, a chair tomorrow. He came and went. Haunting the house, he refused to leave completely. One night, he pulled the phone cord from the wall, tucked the receiver under his arm like a trophy, and said, "I'm taking this." At the precinct, the officer smirked. "Your husband stole your phone? That's not a crime." And I felt invisible all over again. But my lawyer disagreed. And my brothers, God bless my brothers, arrived with new locks, new chains, new deadbolts. That night, for the first time, his key didn't fit, and silence filled the house. The good kind. I bought a used Honda Civic. Freedom smelled like gasoline and worn-out seats. I strapped my children in the back and we drove to the beach. We let the wind scream louder than we could. We ate sandwiches on the hood and laughed with salt drying on our cheeks. That car was more than metal. It was proof that I could move without permission. But freedom is fragile. One Sunday, I parked outside the church. When I came out, the car was gone. Stolen. Rumors swirled. His name whispered in bars. I never proved it. But my family gathered money, piece by piece, and bought me another beater. I named her Mercy. She rattled. She stalled. But she always started. And every start felt like resurrection. Rebuilding isn't glamorous. It's early mornings and late nights. It's making dinner from scraps and pretending it's a feast. It's sewing clothes for neighbors to buy pencils for your kids. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. I finished my degree. I kept a jar where coins became bills. Bills became groceries. Groceries became birthday cakes. At night, instead of silence, our home filled with laughter. We played board games on the floor. We ate pancakes for dinner and called it gourmet. My children learned that joy could exist without fear. And slowly, my son began to trust me again. He crawled back into my lap as if the years of distance could be erased by one long embrace. Years later, when loneliness knocked too loudly, I remarried. His name was Evan. This time, I signed a prenup. Separate property. Separate accounts. I thought I was smarter now, but some patterns wear new clothes. He wasn't violent, just selfish. He loved the way my presence made him look. He loved borrowing my car on his no-drive days. He loved alcohol more than anyone alive. Bills were always split. Benefits were always his. On a dusty road trip, I paid for the motel with my card. Weeks later, the debt still sat on my shoulders. At a diner, I said, "Add the gas from last time, and the car wash too." He smirked and said, "You're really going to keep score?" "Yes," I said, because this was our last receipt together. I let him stay until December, and then I gave myself Christmas again. Divorce tastes like medicine. Bitter at first, but it heals. When Evan texted me the date and time for the notary, it felt like a business appointment with my own freedom. I went. I signed. I walked out into cold winter air, my breath fogging like smoke, and I cried in the car. Not for him, not even for us. I cried for the younger version of me, the girl who thought she needed to be chosen in order to exist. That day, I chose myself. And the world didn't end. It began again. For years I had prayed, "God, please kill him. Please take him away." I believed the prophecy that said his grave was near. But God did not strike him down. God did not send lightning, or sickness, or wrath. Instead, God sent tools. A cousin who fed me courage over a payphone, a therapist who gave me back my name, a brother who changed the locks, children whose laughter reminded me why I must live. I realized then, God was not my hitman. God was my oxygen. He didn't take my husband's life. He gave me back mine. I poured myself into work. Some weeks I taught by day, sewed by night, and graded papers until my eyes blurred. The exhaustion was heavy, but it was mine. I saved every penny. I paid off debts. I repaired the leaking roof one paycheck at a time. I built a safety net made not of money, but of resilience. And with every small victory, every repaired appliance, every full pantry, every birthday cake paid in cash, I remembered. I was no longer surviving. I was rebuilding. Freedom isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's eating ice cream at midnight without fear. Sometimes it's letting your kids stay up late because laughter matters more than bedtime. Sometimes it's pancakes for dinner and board games instead of silence. I stopped hiding food. I stopped rationing joy. I stopped apologizing for existing. One day my son looked at me with wide eyes and said, "Mom, you're smiling different now." And I realized he had grown up watching me try to survive. Now, he was watching me live. At 50 years old, I did something I thought I never would. I got on a plane. It was my first flight. My children and I sat together, nervous and giddy. We ate French fries at 30,000 feet and laughed like we were in Paris, even though we were only going to Florida. It wasn't about the destination. It was about proof. Proof that we could rise. Proof that gravity wasn't the only law. I finished my degree, then another. I stood on a stage in a cap and gown, looking out at my children's faces in the crowd. They clapped until their hands turned red, and in that moment, I knew. I hadn't just rebuilt a career. I had rebuilt myself. I bought a home with a yard big enough for laughter. I hosted dinners with too much food and too much joy. I called friends over for coffee and kept my doors open, because now I decided who came in. For years, my home had been a prison. Now, it was a sanctuary, and every visitor felt the warmth of a woman who had learned how to be whole. I am 60 now, and somehow, I look younger than I did at 25, because freedom is the best skincare. On weekends, I photograph women at sunrise. I tell them, "Don't smile for me. Smile because you survived." Through my camera, I see them the way I once longed to see myself. Brave, radiant, unbroken. I drink strong coffee. I buy myself flowers. I drive wherever I want in a car I paid for with my own name. I laugh loudly. I live loudly. I am not missing pieces. I am whole. Sometimes I read comments from women and hear their voices like a choir behind me. I'm applauding you standing, giant of a woman. I suffered for 36 years, and now I am free, independent, the owner of my life. The physical pain hurts, but the psychological pain destroys. No one deserves contempt. There is a beautiful world when you let go of pain. After separation, every woman I know got better. Their words are more than comments. They are echoes of survival. They are proof that freedom multiplies when we speak it out loud. If you are listening from a bathroom floor tonight, with tears on your cheeks and fear in your chest, I want you to hear me. There is a world outside your doorframe. Therapy is not weakness. Police reports are not gossip. Your brother, your niece, your neighbor, someone will be your midnight car, the way my brother was mine. And if your church chooses rules over your life, then choose your life, because God does not need your bruises to recognize your faith. Hide some cash, memorize a number, tell one safe person, and when you are ready, open that door. Your freedom is holy. Your story is not over. Once, I prayed for him to die. Today, I pray for myself to live. And I do. My life is loud. Loud with my children's laughter. Loud with the click of my camera at dawn. Loud with music in the kitchen and pancakes for dinner. Loud with freedom. I don't need apologies from ghosts. I don't need validation from men who tried to erase me. I don't need a savior, because I became my own. And if you are listening, still afraid, still unsure, I want you to know this. One day, you will be loud too, and the world will hear you roar.